Mercer, and I'm heading up our consumer and media analysis at Strategy Analytics. What I wanted to do, we've got the questions laid out pretty much as they are in your brochures and your schedules. We'll go through them one by one, not necessarily in the right order. It's just to keep you on your toes. But I've pulled some background information together. And unfortunately, we don't have a monitor, so you're going to have to kind of crink your necks if you really want to read the data here. But, so this first question, and they're not mine originally, so it always makes me think, well, let's think about what we're really asking here. But so, how do you prevent viewers from spending 3 hours a night in onboarded OTT apps and bring them home, all in inverted commas, to traditional TV? So I think we get the idea of what we're asking here. I sort of stumbled over the phrase onboarded. It seems to be one of these other, jargon terms that gets thrown around now. I doubt there's many TV viewers who would have any sense of what that meant when they're sitting in front of the TV screen. But anyway, so I thought we'd start by actually stepping back a bit and say, well, what is it we actually mean by watching TV today? Which is an issue that I struggle with as an analyst, frankly. Because I know that consumers struggle with it, and we know from our research people are, questioning what that means. So this is just some data from our media survey last year, and we ask a number of different questions in different ways, quite deliberately, because we want to try and get a feel for, the way people are looking at these things. And if you ask a broad question, without any explanation, did you watch TV? When did you last watch TV? Okay, no further explanation beyond that. You get an answer, and I don't think that data is particularly surprising, perhaps. 94% of the total market, and in fact, millennials, surprisingly to some people perhaps, not so far behind, 89%. Millennials are still watching TV, folks. If you take it a slightly different way and talk about using a TV, so we're talking about the TVs, the big screens in your living rooms and elsewhere, slightly lower numbers in both cases, which suggests that there are clearly some proportion of the audience who are watching TV and not necessarily using a TV screen. Again, we know that there's plenty of that going on. And you can ask that question in another way, and we talk about the time spent watching TV on different screens, and this is self-reported. We all know that self-reported data has to be treated with caution, but again, you get similar evidence there. 3/4 of time spent on TV screen. I think in reality we know it's somewhat higher than that, but that's kind of a benchmark. And then we get to the discovery issues, which a couple of the speakers have already touched on. Do you have a show in mind when you're turning on the TV, when you come to the TV for the first time? And I think Charles talked about this point earlier on. Well, the data that we had, 70% of people know what they want to watch when they sort of sit down in front of the TV. Very similar for millennials. TV is a primary source of entertainment. I'm quite relieved that those figures aren't higher, frankly. I'm glad people actually do have lives outside of the world of television, but it's sort of ballpark figures are around a half, if you like, of the population, slightly higher overall. And then the only one where millennials is higher is in that last one there, watching OTT TV and video on the TV screen. And that's what this whole conference has been about for the last 10 years or so. And guess what? 30% of people now are doing this overall. And in fact, for millennials, it's up to 38% now. So just some kind of data points, I think, to sort of frame the discussion. But I'm interested to get your thoughts on this whole question. If people are using OTT on the big screen, how do we, presumably the question is who are we, but in any case, that's the question. How do we get them to start going back to that thing called traditional TV? So let's go down the lines. If you want to introduce yourself briefly after the question, and then perhaps talk about the question. Thijs, do you want to start?
So I'm Thijs Bijleveld from Metrological. You are creating a dilemma with your first question already. Actually, my thoughts are twofold. On the one hand side, again, how to keep or how to get people back to the live TV experience. For Metrological, providing apps, of course, is by integrating the app or OTT service into the live TV broadcast, right? So whenever you are watching an OTT asset, right, make the link to the linear broadcast or vice versa. The second question that pops up in my mind is, why do we really care? Why do we want to basically get people back to the live TV broadcast? As soon, from an operator perspective, we create a sort of an integrated experience where I would say we also know how to monetize either linear or VOD or OTT content. We really don't care, actually. Right. But that would be basically my two thoughts reading that
Sure.
question.
That is my question. I mean, who cares about it? And
well, from an operator perspective, I would argue as long as I can capture the money, I'm fine, so follow the money. From a content provider perspective, I would say, as long as I'm able to monetize on my content, and it's fine when somebody starts a journey on basically on non-linear, so on OTT, and actually gets a recommendation from a linear show, then fine, just follow the journey, I would say.
I think the implication is behind almost everything we talk about is obviously Netflix, right? Well, and that's not something, as we heard from Randolph, this is now the big challenge that we're facing, the true level of integration, which is the challenge for those OT.
Let me share one example, right? On again, you can basically see Netflix as a threat. We are happy to work, for Liberty Global being one of our customers. We have provided them with, let's say, a Netflix implementation. But for example, by also putting Netflix on position 150, in the guide, that actually, turns into an opportunity, right? Because they are in, I would say, the main TV experience all the time. So let's create launch points, right? Let's not think in a very separated way, but let's merge.
Even if your clients if your customers are paying for Netflix VOD rather than the service provider VOD.
Well, but the trick is, as we all know, right? Let's take another example. If people run supermarkets and you have one very popular product, we all know that if we are, basically wrapping that product with interesting other products which are contextual, which are relevant, then that will boost your sales. So what can we learn from that?
Supermarkets.
Well, maybe it's a bit flat. I'm sorry about that, but maybe we can also learn something from it. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay, Adam, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm broadly aligned with that position, I think. And it's always fun to throw the Netflix conversation, or throw the Netflix name into any conversation, because we tend to, it sometimes feels we're sort of terrified of Netflix. Oh my God, Netflix is coming, they'll kill us. And clearly that's not true at all. Netflix has been successful in the UK market for a while, and you know what? Other companies are still successful as well. It's not that Netflix is going to come along and steal the food from our children's table.
Well, I think those points always come from the US perspective, where of course pay television in the traditional sense has been in decline for some time. And there's an assumption that it's because of Netflix, but I don't know whether.
I think it's because the world moves on. Years ago, the place I worked had a quote on the wall, and it said something like, "Only a fool stands in the way of progress and lets the train of time run over it." I can't remember who it was, but it's a good quote, and we can try and build walls around ourselves and say, no, the world is linear, our world will always be linear, everything else can clear off, we're going to insulate ourselves, and that doesn't help, that doesn't bring us on at all, and I think Netflix is a superb example of a good, easy-to-use service with some great content, but for me, the thing that makes Netflix great isn't that it's a nice UI or that there's something particularly attractive about its billing model. I know, those things are good, but I go to Netflix because Netflix has content that I like. I like Homeland, right? So I watched some of the earlier, because I'm always a bit slow with this stuff. I caught up with Homeland on Netflix, but the last series I watched on Channel 4 because that's where it was. It was the content that took me to where I needed to be. It's not, right, let's go to Netflix. It was, let's watch Homeland, or I watch Have I Got News for You because it's on BBC. I'd equally watch it on Netflix. As a consumer, I don't care. I want to be entertained. So if I'm being entertained by something that's on a live linear channel, or if it's on Amazon Prime or Netflix or anywhere else, I'll go there for it.
Yeah.
And does that make me disloyal? Does that pose some massive death threat to ITV and Channel 4 and 5 and Sky and everyone else? No, I don't think so. There's room in my life for content from many different places. And so long as that content's good, as long as it entertains me, as long as, and I think the points that Charles was making earlier are so true, as long as I can find it easily, then I'm happy.
Right.
What I really don't like about Netflix is turning Netflix on, if you want to put it like that, and then spending half an hour wading through it and still finding nothing. That's what annoys me. So if I know what I want to watch, then life is good.
And we'll come to that point in a moment, but, but let's dive into that question, because you've touched on, I think, it is really the integration question now. I'll come to the operator, or one of the operators on the panel here. Let's get Michael's experience on, specifically the user experience. What are your challenges as an operator, and what are your objectives for bringing all this stuff together and help people find what it is they want? How do you go about that?
I think taking the view of the user, it's really important what Adam just said, that you don't care actually where the content comes from. So you are looking for specific content and you want to watch it. Yeah. So I think the main task for us when we think about user interface design, and of course the technology which has to surface, is to break up these segregated worlds which were created. So OTT players like, of course, Netflix and Amazon, but especially as well as all the catch-up players, they want to create segregated worlds. And we as a platform have to surface content again in an aggregated world. And that doesn't mean only bringing these different sources to one level and show them all in the user interface. It has to go a step further. And that's actually meaning turning user interfaces again from being source-driven to content discovery-driven. That means content first, source second. What mainly user interfaces do today is like taking these kind of OTT players or whatever, not even only the OTT players, they do it with their own content. They do it also with linear content in the catch-up worlds. They create different silos, and we need as a user to decide, do I want to now watch catch-up? Do I want to now watch linear? Do I want to watch now something which is on Netflix or somewhere else? So it's always we are getting forced to make a decision first of the source before we look for the content. That is completely wrong. We have to turn this around, and that means actually find your content and then decide about the source you want to watch it. And I think that's the key driver for both worlds. It's the key driver for integrating these OTT players, and they want to be integrated. I mean, Netflix is getting in contact, Amazon Video is getting in contact with all the bigger platforms. They want to be integrated because they also look for new audiences to find their content, and they are much more willing, I think, as well, that being integrated in a way that, as you just said it, they wanna discover user audience again, which are looking for their older content which they have on their platform, because nobody's watching that on Netflix. So they're very much integrated on having exactly this use case solved. You as a user want to catch up with a TV series, and you watched season 1 to 5 or 1 to 3 over Netflix, and then the new season comes out, and then you watch it over whatever channel is just broadcasting it. And that goes, I think, even goes to a level that you have to integrate also linear. Because of that, you have to integrate linear into the aggregation concept. So it means if I click on a content like Homeland, I want to see this is running currently on TV in this and that episode, and I can record it or can wait for the catch-up file for tomorrow. Or I go to the whatever pay provider and pay for this episode already because I don't want to wait till next week until it's streamed, or whatever the business model is. So that's for me aggregation, and that's something we still have to really solve in a very, very good way.
Do you think your users would they understand the question of what traditional TV is now versus all the other stuff that's available on that big screen? Does it make any difference from the user point of view now?
If you do it in this way, I think it doesn't matter anymore. Of course, a user has to be willing to look for content and not doing only channel up and down. So we will have a user base which is only doing channel up and down, maybe, right. Which you will not get into on-demand services. But I think there's still a chance to get people who are only watching on demand. Think about the generation Z. We millenniums, I see myself as a millennium.
That's hard.
Very close, very early. we still understand and know, or Generation X or whatever you want to call it. I'm not that young anyway. So we still know the channels, we still know the channel names. But the Generation Z, they might not even know anymore what is ITV, because they grow up with YouTube. To get them back to watch linear is possible exactly with this model of integration.
So that's the next question. We'll come to that in a moment, but let me ring Miles in and let's get the YouView thoughts on these.
Okay.
You're going to do something impressive with your...
Yeah, so I've got some stats. Now, I'm head of UX at YouView. We're an aggregator in the UK, and we launched in 2011, and last year we relaunched our UI in HTML and using a bit of cloud. One of the big things that we got in, which we're still quite excited about, is data hooks. So we know what the users of our set-top box are doing. The things with the data hooks, there's a couple of quid pro quos, legals. We only know what the set-top box is doing, and we don't really know what people are doing on the mobile devices. But we know that our users are watching 4 hours, 34 minutes a day, which is quite similar to what's going on TiVo boxes. I suspect it's PVRs. However, 82% of that viewing is live DTT and IP channels, which is 224 minutes a day. 11% are recordings, and only 21 minutes, 8%, is VOD. So I think we're still... I think it's quite different on mobile devices, but where the primary TV set is being viewed, there isn't that much VOD watching on our platform. And I think the challenge is more to increase the amount of VOD viewing.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, again, I guess from the point of view of YouView, you kind of everything's within your control, as it were, and I mean, but you have some over the top, I mean, true sort of partner apps and things, I think, in there as well.
Yeah. So
what's the situation there?
We've got so all the broadcaster apps, ITV, BBC, Channel 4. Yeah. We got Netflix. Yeah. We don't have Amazon. I like Amazon, and we've got quite a lot of the good content.
So people are presumably not using Netflix because they're not subscribers at the moment. I mean, that's the main issue. And I mean, is it in your interest to help Netflix obviously get more subscribers? And
I think the people that have Netflix watch a lot of Netflix, but
obviously that's a small part of the overall activity because the VOD is very low at the moment.
Yeah, but it's also PVR. PVR still dwarfs VOD viewing.
I'm glad you mentioned DVRs. I was going to raise that in one of the previous panels. Yeah. What's the DVR usage like? Did you mention that?
So yeah, let me go again.
I
don't want to do Diane Abbott.
I'll put you on the spot. We can come back to that.
Right. The 11% of our viewing is recordings, 29 minutes. Okay. I'm personally quite surprised that people watch 4 hours, 34 minutes of TV a day. I mean, that's a large amount of viewing.
Do you know they're in front of the TV though, or have they left it on and they've wandered off to, I don't know, make a cake or whatever?
We don't know.
Inspired by Bake Off.
We don't know demographics. We don't know if these are millennials. It's just a set-top box to us, and it's because of our relationship with the broadcasters. We can't get go too specific.
And it's a good number for advertising.
But I think what's interesting is hearing these numbers and comparing them with the other numbers we saw in the presentation. I think that clearly shows that, of course, with certain platforms you address a certain user group. You have when you look at these numbers, they are like the global numbers over all users from all platforms. So I think that also shows nicely what a giant task we have currently. That we have, if we develop today a user interface, it's the most challenging time to develop a user interface because you have customers, and we as Vodafone have a similar demographics. It's more the older generation who are Vodafone customers. We have customers we still have to serve with the linear TV experience. When we rolled out our new products and we test them, we really have to look how we select the customers, because we can get completely different results, because they are the people who really only want to do channel up and down. But then you have the other side of the people who don't want to do channels at all anymore. They are only looking for OTT content. And to bring this in one experience, that's the major challenge.
Thijs, you've been wanting.
Yeah, as I said, again, listening to a couple of the stories, I'm also, I would say, challenged to say, all right, let's not only talk about Netflix, let's talk about hundreds of OTT and app services, right? Because I would say one discussion indeed is, all right, how to create an integrated view. But 9 out of 10 times, at least, with the customers we work with, they bump into a very practical question like, all right, how do we onboard it? So how do we support that integration, right? So if you basically want to take all the apps natively and put them on the boxes, A, your box gets chunked, but B, you are stuck in a forever integration effort. So, you also need to do some things, I would say, on, with regards to putting a smart framework in that actually allows you to onboard those apps. Secondly, if we want to help our customer finding the content, all right, from a UX perspective, you want to support the integrated search, but you also need to figure out, how that search goes down into all the individual apps and OTT services, right? Because as I said, at the end of the day, I really couldn't care less who is giving me the asset. And if it's live, right, because it's on now, great. But if I need to go into an OTT service, that's fine. But how do we actually make that work on a simple set-top box in a way that I don't have to do the same job 300 times or whatever, hundreds of times all over again? So I would say the interesting point here is that from one hand side, it's a conceptual discussion on how consumers are actually thinking and using TV, but at the other hand, there's always a sort of a technical discussion in the I would say in the back that 9 out of 10 times is actually slamming the brakes. So how do we turn that around? How can we use smart frameworks, smart integrations to actually make sure that we can onboard those OTT content in a way that the UX at the end of the day is what we want it to be, just one screen, personalized, offering me the content that I want, regardless the source.
Okay. Well, look, we've touched on a couple of things already on the next question, but you're going to have to greet me next again. If you want to see this
We're sitting in the wrong
data, but this is the...
this is UX, isn't it? Don't you think?
So this is probably one case where the screen's too big, but anyway. We've touched on this whole business of the demographics, and this is the content discovery question, I think. How can we get younger viewers watching more linear TV, older viewers watching more on demand? Again, I think the question is, well, do you want to do that, and does anybody really care?
Who cares? Yeah.
But the question is actually fundamentally, how do people find content? And obviously Charles has talked about some of this. Again, data from our research last year. I think even Charles mentioned this actually about these numbers about, well, people go to shows because they watch it. That's what they know. They go and watch regularly. And of course, that's actually the first, the first sort of driver to watching content here. Guess what? TV trailers, they work. That's the next most popular, even for millennials. They're watching a show and you advertise a show, in the ad breaks. That's going to get you some viewers. And then you come down to these other sort of paths of discovery. And I think the main point here, of course, is the difference between the age groups, the generations. Millennials, friends and family. And this is a point we found from some research several years ago, actually. And I was going to raise the question of trust, actually. It's not just about the roots and sort of sharing information. It's about who do the viewers actually trust as a source of recommendation. And millennials tend to trust their friends or tend to use friends and family more often. The social media is another question that we've been asked to look at. Guess what? That's a strong one for millennials relative to baby boomers, but actually a relatively low source of discovery at the moment. And as you've already mentioned, the baby boomers, yes, they tend to, there's some channel surfing, there's some browsing of the TV guides, and of course they're much more likely to do that sort of thing than the younger age groups. So again, some sort of background data points there, but coming back to this question, are you interested, are your customers interested in trying to change viewing habits of the different user groups and demographics? If so, how do you do that with your UIs? Who wants to kick off with this one?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
great.
Miles, did you want to?
Yeah.
You've got some more data
I
for us as
got
well.
my numbers. Okay, so our most dominant feature in our UI, with possibly the exception of channel number input, which I think probably is the most used thing, is our guide. We've got a backwards EPG that shows 7 days backwards, 7 days forward, and we show on-demand linkage in the backwards guide. Essentially, we get 90% of our customers launching our guide in a week. It's on average launched 8.5 times a day, and normally from the guide key. So we show our guide in two places. One through a main menu, which is we've kind of like iterated over that in the new UI. And the other one is the guide RCU key. And most of the time, 93%, they're just hammering this key. I suspect it's probably one of the keys that burns out quickest. And it also happens to be our highest launching of on-demand content. I've got the numbers there, but on another slide I'll get to them. But 51% of our users just use the guide to tune to live TV. So I think this is probably, from here on, it's like inferences. My suspicion is we appeal to a slightly older demographic. People are very familiar with the guide, and it's not as true for your millennials. But it's like filling out the backwards EPG is really, it's a familiar way for users to navigate, especially on TV sets. And that will really bolster your on-demand viewing. The other thing that we've recently done is our main menu. So one of the things we try to latch onto is that, and I would contrast us slightly with some other UIs. We try make it easy to explore the interface without having to bring up a full screen interface. We bring up a main menu which only covers the bottom quarter to third of the screen, and we'll populate it with different recommendations from each section, so that it really promotes the viewing experience as opposed to like covering up TV and forcing you to watch TV via a pip. Now, our main menu is now our second highest used feature. It's got 3.6 launches per day. We promote it, so when the set-top box turns on, it comes up. And we're promoting a number of content items across recordings, on-demand, and live TV. And we're hoping by intermingling these things that it will really drive the uptake of on-demand. And we also include the player launch points within this main menu.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, I want to take questions from the audience, so please do indicate. I'll come in a couple of minutes and put your hands up, and we'll try and get some discussion going there as well.
Can I ask you one question? So what are you actually displaying in the guide? Are you basically using the guide for only displaying the linear content, or are you? No,
we've got 7 days forward, 7 days back. So yes. I think it shows the skew of how much content is just launched. People are only more interested in catch-up than long tail. And we show the successful recordings, which are a handful, and we show all the on-demand linkage in the backwards EPG.
Are you putting OTT services in your guide?
Not at the moment. We show IP channels in there, but we don't have a rail for Netflix.
Yeah.
I think what the YouView UI launched, was it last year or this year? I think it was around end of the year, right?
Last year.
I think it showed a really nice way of cleaning up the screen and make space for really watching, keeping the context. I like that work very much, I have to say. What we did at Vodafone last year in our product launches, we took a similar approach, I would say. We created 2 launch points. They are for us on the same level. And what we did is that we went, I would say it's a slightly different approach. What my task, what I said earlier also was what I thought is most important is to surface those contents from these different sources immediately in the main menu. This is of course you have there always the conflict of how much do you cover and how much do you show. Therefore, what we did in the main menu, it's also transparent. You don't lose context what you're currently watching. It doesn't matter if you watch a linear channel or if you watch some on-demand program. You bring up the main menu, it overlays it. You still have the context, but it overlays like 80% of the screen. But therefore, we have space enough to show all the content in this main menu. So we have a section where you see your most watched channels. You see a section where you see the recommended on-demand contents. And when I say on-demand, for us, that's what I meant earlier. We are not segregating. It doesn't matter if it's catch-up, if it's TVOD, if it's SVOD content, if it comes from Netflix, if it comes from ourselves. Yeah. And then we have a section with OTT launch points, app launch points. And of course, the typical MyTV section, which is, I think everybody has that. So that was very important for me to say, like, user here, we treat everything the same way. We don't decide anymore for you. You launch the top-level menu, and we are focused on linear, for example. So we said, like, here are 4 sections, and these are the covering the 4 sections of all the typical contents users want to watch. Doesn't matter if they are 60 plus or 19 or 16.
And what results have you seen from your users from this?
It creates a very so we have very, very positive results. Users like exactly this experience when they are in the user groups of millennials and Generation X and Z. So these kind of users, they definitely like this approach.
But do they use more VOD than they would have done otherwise in previous platforms?
They do. We drive customers definitely in VOD because they see it. But it's also we let the users understand that VOD doesn't mean pay TV. Right. So a lot of users think on-demand is always like a TVOD service. So that was for us also important to show them. On-demand means also catch-up. Catch-up is on-demand as well, and it's for free. So the other launch point, but it's really it's a very important thing. Lots of people still think that when something is titled on-demand, it costs money directly.
Because that's how the industry was modeled for years.
Exactly. Yeah. So the other launch point is where we thought, because we didn't want to separate extra catch-up out in the main menu, because as I said, I don't believe in this way of thinking that customers go particularly into a catch-up area. But of course, catch-up is important to surface directly when you are in the channel up and down user journey. That is why we also, of course, it's also nothing new anymore to have this backwards EPGs. We created an element where you see like really 70% of the screen, and you have an X navigation visual. We call it a visual EPG, which is only focusing on one channel, which you currently watch. So you bring it up, and then you can browse through the channels and browse on the X-axis and Y-axis over content or channels, and you can go into the past or in the future. So, but it's all presented in the same way. So again, to drive this behavior or hopefully support this behavior, customers shouldn't care anymore.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, look, we've got a few more things to get through. So. The next question I'm skipping to is on social media, which again is sort of something we've been talking about for many years, it seems. This is just some work that we did 18 months ago now. Actually, this is, that's right. This is related to, this is some user-focused work, so it's a different piece of research that we did. But it's asking people in general the interest in recommendations based on social media platforms. And you can see here, I'm sure you get some of this feedback as well. There are obviously the positive side. If the recommendations come from people you know, in other words, not your 500 or 5,000 Facebook friends, which I certainly don't have, but 500 out there. But if it's people you know and trust, then that seems to be something that people find positive. Although they are very concerned about this whole business of spam. Sort of reference to Candy Crush there. You've got friends who are playing that. You seem to get pop-ups every 5 minutes inviting you to play and so on. So those are the things that we have to be aware of. But I suppose my question is why have we not seen more of this integration, again, primarily on the TV screen, with the Twitter and Facebook, which can link very easily to content recommendations. What are the barriers there? Are they user barriers? Are there some technical or business issues? Adam, do you want to kick off this one?
Yeah, I think it is both. But maybe a few things. It's hard enough trying to log into a TV screen anyway, and it annoys the hell out of me. So having to then integrate it with Twitter, LinkedIn, and whatever. LinkedIn, what a terrible example that would be. Facebook.
At least you have 500 connections.
Actually, I've got some friends there.
Yeah.
But it's clumsy and not that pleasant. And I think the other point is I remember having this discussion with a customer in South Africa a couple of years ago. And they said, do I really want to tell my friends what I'm watching on TV? I mean, really? and the other point is a TV is a shared experience. So you might find that you're telling all your friends on Facebook with great pride that you really like the new Peppa Pig episode, which it probably isn't you watching it. So I think there's an appropriateness thing here. What is interesting to some extent is that most of the prospects we talk to, rather than customers, always have social integration. It's kind of, we want one of them. We want to integrate socially. But the question is why? What really are you going to get out of that? And maybe I'm being a little over-skeptical about it, but I can't quite see the value yet. I like recommendations. I like the way I can see Rotten Tomatoes or an IMDb rating when I'm looking at content. And that matters to me because there's an audience of, 500,000 or 1 million people rating it, and that's a good thing. But a limited audience of my mates who happen to think that some particular episode is good, I don't know if I particularly care.
Michael, was there any reason have you done this yet? Have you looked at it? Or?
Yeah, of course, we looked at it. I did it in my previous job about 8 years ago. We integrated a Facebook app and how you can post content directly over your remote to Facebook. Yeah. Till now, I would say it's not really worth it. It's not the experience you do. You don't use your TV to do this. You have your phone for doing that. And it will not change. I'm sure it will not change. Okay. On top of that, Facebook is changing their APIs and Twitter and whoever every, I don't know how many months, even weeks sometimes, and they don't tell you about that. So it's an absolute technical nightmare. Not that it's my problem as my responsibility, but still, I think it's not easy to work with those players in a more not so flexible environment than a TV product. On top of that, what you were saying, recommendation, I don't know. I always look at it in that way. If I compare my 3 closest friends and I compare with them, what music do we like? It's about 90% the same. With TV and video content, it goes down to 50. So I think it's maybe good for music and other contents, but TV, video, movies, TV series is very individual. I think it's very hard to find from your closed group really valuable recommendations. And then if you get them more in a direct way than over Facebook, I still hope. Right. On the other side, what I like is using social media for predictions. So what we heard from Tivo, looking into what are the next upcoming contents, that is really something really interesting, which you could hopefully pull out in a meaningful way from social networks. So that doesn't mean what is most watched. That's mostly something which I'm not interested in, because the majority of the broad view of people who want to watch something is maybe not my interest, but upcoming contents which not many people might yet watch, but it's super trending, that you can pull out hopefully from social networks and integrate it into TV services.
Sure. Okay.
And just the last sentence. Netflix had this very early on. The prediction or what your friends watch. Yeah. And they killed it, I think, 1.5 years ago. So I think that also shows it's not really working in your close friends.
Right. It's a thumbs down so far.
Yeah. Maybe I can jump in shortly. Totally, the same experience. And I would say, in comment to you, Michael, yes, it's us basically dealing with all the lifecycle management of the app. So if an API fails, we need to jump in. So times 300, that's a nice job. So we had the experience, let's call it, with Twitter 1.0 years ago, and that's totally, I would say, a thumbs down. Very recently, we have started a new integration with Twitter. It's called Watch with Twitter. It's about to go live shortly, and that is nothing similar to, I would say, the old school Twitter, which basically showed the Twitter bar on your screen. But it's actually more like a lean back experience where you can actually see where the current viewers overall, the other, I would say, linear channels and VOD and OTT services currently are, and where you can actually just via one click on your remote, zap directly the box to that specific show or that specific OTT asset. So I'm not saying that that's the holy grail. I'm just saying if you look back, the way we have integrated Twitter back then was nothing more, nothing less than just showing the bar on TV. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty thrilled to actually now see what's going on. And what we are doing with Twitter in that sense is we are onboarding the new Watch with Twitter service, but we also use our back end to get all the marketing analytics out. So we hope to learn via that marketing analytics also, all right, where are the I would say the sweet spots in that service, where are people dropping off, can we improve? So that's also a way how to learn, but maybe next year we can report how that went. But definitely it asks for a different approach. I think that's key. It needs to be contextual, and it needs to add something to the TV viewing experience, and not, Twitter is much more easy to check on your smartphone, right?
There's no doubt both Twitter and Facebook have got television as a strategic priority, which is good for all of us. Are there any questions we can bring in from the audience just to wrap up the session? Being very, very quiet. I guess you must be ready for lunch. Well, I'm not going to let you go just yet, because you've got 2 minutes, and we have to talk about voice because it's the topic of the moment. This is just some work we did towards the end of last year on the Amazon Echo one is last year. We also looked at voice a while back with Xbox One, because if you know Xbox, they integrated voice control into their television guide and their various OTT apps quite a few years ago now. And again, you get pros and cons. I think the Echo thing is fascinating, and as I said earlier on, I do think we've got this sort of tipping point in terms of the capabilities of the technologies there. So it's clearly something that's very exciting. But as always, you get the questions from certain users, particularly the portability aspect on the Echo is the big one. People say, why is this thing plugged into the wall? Nothing else I have is plugged in. So I'm sure that Amazon will be addressing that point. But so, views, just to wrap up very quickly on voice and the UI and controlling and discovering in the television experience. We'll have a quick rundown. Should we start with you, Thijs?
Sure. Well, from our perspective, we need to be ready. So what we do basically for all the content that we provide, we make sure that at least WebRTC is supported, so we can support basically voice guidance within the apps.
How important is it going to be in the overall?
Well, as said, I tend to turn around that whole sense of logic. Basically, I don't care if voice is going to be the next thing. It's my responsibility as Metrological to make sure that at least whenever it hits, we make sure that across the board on all the apps that we provide, we are ready. Okay. From a personal standpoint, I was just thinking about the moment when you have to buy a new car, and then you have to spec all the options, right? And I was just with the pen around, all right, voice control. I was like, all right, so what is the real value add? I can imagine, right, that whatever we are going to learn shortly is if voice, what voice means in certain areas, right? Might be that for TV, because there's so much content in, and it's so complex to go directly to the right source that it makes sense. But for me, I'm still a bit, I would say, on the point where I actually like to have some more data and some more, I would say, user information to actually see what that means for our TV ecosystem.
Adam, we're going to be talking to our TVs in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I shout at mine often, but in the future it will listen, and that's a good thing. But if I had to place a bet on something that's going to be radically ahead of where we are now in the next 6 and 12 months, then it would definitely be on voice. Better natural language recognition, better search algorithms that let me come in and say, and I don't think I care whether I'm saying it to my TV or to Echo or to anything else. I've had a terrible day. Give me a Schwarzenegger film, but not Total Recall because it's awful. And I will then get something, and that has to be better than sitting there
Right.
doing all this.
So again, it's the discovery question.
Absolutely, and I think it's going to be big.
Yeah. Okay, Michael. Is it integrated yet? No.
Not yet, but one of the projects we're currently working on, yes, for sure. I think it's all about, it comes all down to how natural is the input. I think output is, so understanding it and the output is very, very good. I mean, we see this with all the technologies more or less, if it's Google, if it's Amazon, or if it's others, the output and finding content is very good. How the system understands language, I think that's what has to be done better, because I think as long we still have to tell customers up front what you can do and can say and what you can't say and how you should say it, it will be always an experience which is slightly disappointing or becomes disappointing.
Yeah.
So it has to be something where I can simply say what I normally say if I want to search or if I want to do it's not only about search, it's also about commands of navigating. If we once get there, then yeah, we can, especially we designers, we can think about if user interfaces are still necessary, actually.
Good one.
Any final thoughts, Mark?
Yeah, I really like the movie Her. That's essentially where, you know, like it will eventually end up. We work with Sony. We're available on the Sony TV sets. So YouView comes inbuilt, and Google doing their big I/O conference. I suspect they've got some big announcements for voice.
Right.
They're aggressively like in this with Amazon.
Yeah.
And yeah, probably in a day or two we'll find out what they're up to.
We described it recently as the new battle of the platforms in the digital home. You know, the usual guys, Google, Amazon, and no doubt others will trying to control this.
It is a bit weird. It took Microsoft so long because I worked on Xbox stuff before YouView, as when I was working for the agency IOCO, and I thought they were very ahead of their time with their voice input on for the Xbox, and quite why it's taken them this long to decouple it, I don't know.
Anyone from Microsoft want to comment? Okay, well, listen, we've more than caught up with time, so I guess everybody's tummies are rumbling. I know mine is. So thank you very much for a fascinating discussion, guys, and appreciate your appreciation for the panel. Thank you.